and welcome to episode 37 of Gar Borras' Time Machine. Now, Gar, this is our first show of the new year for 2023, so I'd like to welcome you and everybody into the new year. How was the holidays for you?
It's the holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving.
New Year's. Yeah. Like I said, 2023.
It's all concentrated at that time at the end of the year.
Well, as we announced on our Facebook page today, episode 37 is going to be on I Love Lucy. We're calling this our We Love Lucy episode because it's going to be a three-parter now. In part one today, we're going to be talking all about I Love Lucy. So let's get into Gar. This was one of the shows that you told me when we were coming up with show ideas for this year. You said, I would definitely love to do one on I Love Lucy. And so that's why we're kicking the new year off with this. So let's... since this is kind of your choice, let's talk about how you first got into I Love Lucy. What are your memories of seeing the show and how you first got into it?
Well, of course, as a kid, when I was a child, in my elementary school years, was back in the 60s, and my mom and my dad were kind of almost a mirror image of Lucy and Ricky.
Wow.
Because my mom has like some Scotch-Irish background with the red hair.
Okay.
And my dad is of Latin descent.
Oh, wow.
So, which...
you can relate to, obviously, yeah.
It was a very, very favorite show of my mom's, and of course she watched it a lot. And of course, when you're the kid,
you join in.
You're gonna wind up watching it too, and of course it's funny.
Oh, sure.
Because that's the one thing about the show that made it so popular, because everybody talks about the Lucy, the Ricky, and the this and the that and all this, but if the show wasn't as
funny,
absolutely hilarious as it was, it would not have had the kind of iconic success. That the show was an absolutely hilariously funny show. Yeah.
As we're going to get into today's episode, we're going to start talking about, a lot of that had to do with a reason. This show premiered on CBS back in 1951. It's in the early years of television, and so because of that, the show featured a lot of firsts, if you will. I mean, for one thing, I was reading when I Love Lucy first premiered in 1951. That was the very first year they started having the Nielsen rating. So that had a lot to do with the success of this, and we'll get a lot of that other stuff. But I Love Lucy is an American television sitcom series that starred Lucile Ball and her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz. The series originally aired on CBS from October 15th, 1951 to May 6th, 1957. The show also featured Vivian Vance and William Frawley as Lucy and Ricky's landlords and best friends, Ethel and Fred Mertz. Now, I should also, before we get too much into today's episode, let people know that before there was ever an I Love Lucy, of course, Lucile Ball had a huge movie career before that, and what actually spawned the I Love Lucy TV show was, prior to the TV show, she had a radio program she was on called My Favorite Husband, and she was a star of that. And because of the success of the radio show, they wanted to kind of create a TV kind of version of the radio show, and that's where they got the idea for I Love Lucy.
Yes, and when they approached her, with the idea of making it into a TV show, the only way that she would agree to it is if they made her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, the husband character in the show. Yeah. And the studios were against it. Times were very different. Yeah. And, the studios were... Not quite. They had apprehensions about, a white woman with a Latin husband.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How America would accept it, and so to prove their point, that it would work and it would transfer. What Lucy and Desi did is they worked with some people that had vaudevillian background, and they put together like a show, kind of skit type show thing, and they did it for the network executives, and the network executives realized that it did, it would transfer, and it would be it would be fine and everything, and so then they gave it the double thumbs up.
And I think that shows part of Lucile Ball's kind of power, if you will, at that time in the industry. I mean, again, she had a bit of a movie career before she was on radio or any of this, but because like you said, they were initially against the idea of her and her real life husband kind of being a team on TV. But from what I was reading, she basically pretty much told the network brass that if you want me to do it, the only way I'm going to do it is if you let Desi be part of it. And so again, women at that time in Hollywood did not really have that kind of power, but they wanted her bad enough to play the part of Lucy that they said, okay, we better go along with this, if otherwise she's not going to agree to do it.
Well, I think her radio program show, because it's such a mental. You're basically hearing something and then visualizing it in your head, kind of like what you do when you're reading a book. Yeah,
I mean, if you, I was thinking about this today in prepping for a show, Gar. Like we did past episode, for example, on the 1931 horror film, Universal horror film, Frankenstein, and that film, all the way back in 1931. That's when really these movies and everything was really in their infancy, and they're just learning how to make movies. And you stop and think about the fact, okay, that movie, for example, was based on a novel, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, like from the 1800s. And so just a transition from, when they're talking, let's say, like Frankenstein or something like that, from a book to the big screen, and then something like what we're talking about today, I Love Lucy. They get the idea because she has a successful radio show. And from what I understand, they initially wanted the guy that played her husband on the radio show. I think the initial, okay, we're going to transition this radio show that is popular and turn it into a TV show. They wanted to initially use the same cast. And so, again, talk about technology and entertainment and the transition, like even from something that is initially just heard on the radio, and then all of a sudden it's on the television. You're able to watch it. You're able to see these characters kind of come to life, if you will. I mean, that's an amazing thing in itself.
Well, what I was kind of alluding to was that she I think she, because you could only, you're sitting at home and you're listening to it, and you're only hearing the voices. Yeah. And I think that something was coming through. Yeah. That the executives were noticing that people were gravitating towards her personality. That was she was the star, even though the name of my favorite husband or what, you know what I mean? But she was the star of the show. Oh, sure. And her personality was transferring
from the radio
through the radio, and they could see this lady is going to be a star.
Yeah, and
because this is before she became, the powerful,
force in Hollywood.
Hollywood player. This is way before she became a Hollywood player.
And I'm gonna bust a myth that a lot of people have about Lucile Ball. Now, because of the success of I Love Lucy, once people start seeing her on TV and how that transitioned from the radio to the TV screen, a lot of people still to this day think of Lucile Ball as a redhead. But that's a myth. I was reading she was actually born as a brunette, and then once she started doing I Love Lucy, She had somebody that did her hair, and they had a special kind of formula they did to create the kind of redhead that she's known for. But again, that's a myth that she's a redhead. But that's kind of part of the Lucy character with I Love Lucy. She created that style, and a lot of people would be surprised to find out she was actually a brunette.
Yes. It's just the show was more than just a TV show.
Oh yeah.
Because there's so many other things that spawned out of that show.
Yeah.
Number one, Desi Studios, was the whole thing was they didn't Lucy and Desi didn't want to move to New York.
Yeah.
They were happy living here in Southern California, and so they pushed hard to do the production here in Hollywood rather than going to the East Coast, and that was a real struggle between both of them and the studio execs and the sponsor Philip Morris, who back in those days Philip Morris was very, very powerful.
Oh sure.
And so they're basically saying if we're gonna finance this, then you're gonna do what we say, kind of thing. It was a tug of war.
Oh sure.
And then winds up, Lucy and Desi wound up, getting what they wanted, but they wound up having to, strike deals with studios, with stages, and doing all of this stuff to put together the production. They had to do a bunch of construction to make the studio that they were going to film be able to accommodate a live audience, which was a first.
Oh sure.
Another first.
Yeah.
There are so many firsts.
In fact,
for that show.
In fact, it kind of
they had that place redone so it would accommodate a live audience. Another thing that they did that was another first was they were the first production company to film TV shows.
Oh yes.
With multiple cameras.
Yes.
Up until that point, TV shows were filmed with a single camera, but it was the Desi Studios. They're thinking that they would be able to do their job much better if they had multiple cameras. They would be able to create the scenes and make it more seamless and things like that, and have more effect, on the audience.
Yeah.
So there's just so many things that they were doing back then. Another thing, filming a TV show on 35 millimeter. That's the highest quality film for that time, and the studios were against that because of the high cost of the filming. But having the choice of doing the and really standing firm on your stance on doing it with 35 millimeter turned out to be another godsend, because then it allowed them to do something that they couldn't have done if they would have used the normal TV show format.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is reruns.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Reruns because Lucy was giving birth and she needed time to be able to
recover or whatever.
From the pregnant, from giving birth.
Yeah.
And so to buy time, for those episodes that they couldn't film during that time, they played reruns. And then the studios found out that the reruns got extremely high ratings, and then now Desi Studios is striking a deal with the studios, a rerun deal.
Yeah, now, Gar, did you...
Reruns never existed that time.
Yeah.
Which that rerun deal, along with everything else that they did, made Lucy and Desi the first actor and actress millionaires ever.
Yeah, and in regards to the reruns, like you said, we have them to thank for all these shows that make monies on reruns, and during the summer season, it's become a commonplace thing to run reruns during summer. But other thing, but the I Love Lucy reruns, when they first started that, they were so popular. But I was reading some businesses and local restaurants would actually have people come in, or they'd be closed for business. And they'd allow people to come in to their businesses and watch these reruns. And nothing like that had ever been done before.
Yeah, well, Lucy was the first female to ever run
A studio.
A studio.
Yeah, and
there are so many things about Lucy and Desi in this show that everybody, they created these things. These things never existed before them. They created it, and now people take those things for granted.
I mean,
most people don't even know that they are the creators of it. If it wasn't for them, who knows how things would be nowadays?
And
you know what I mean? They were really more than just comedians and personalities. They were major forces in major changes that exist now that we all take for granted, and we don't have any idea that they are the people behind it.
And it also said, in regards to some more first, in regards to I Love Lucy was the very first scripted TV show. So again, this was the first time when they actually sat down and really wrote a long script, for each of the episodes. That's where kind of that originated. And it said, I Love Lucy was also the first television show to actually feature an ensemble cast. I mean, when we think ensemble cast, we think of maybe like All in the Family, we think of Seinfeld, but that's where, you have Lucile Ball and Desi Arnaz, but then you have the other people that star in the show. And so... another
first!
And then if you look at I know John Ritter was a huge Lucille Ball fan, and there was a look back episode where Lucille Ball was a guest, and looking back at some of the past episodes, John Ritter comes into the scene. They have a little talk and talk about physical comedy. That's another thing. I Love Lucy was it was a vehicle for her to do her physical comedy. So, and again, kind of Three's Company, I've heard people talk about in the past, comparing it to I Love Lucy in the sense that, the landlords on both shows lived downstairs and they would interact with the other cast members. So that was kind of also a nod in regards to Three's Company, as also like a nod to I Love Lucy.
Yes, yeah. It's just really astounding how many firsts came out of that show.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. They were groundbreakers. Literally groundbreakers. And the whole thing about reruns, discovering that reruns were extremely lucrative, was all an accident. All they were doing was adjusting and on the fly to be able to, make the show keep going on while she was recovering from giving birth.
And like we talked in past episodes, I mean, I can even remember from my own childhood, I used to plan my activities and schedule around what was on TV. Like, I want to be home to see Happy Days Tuesday night at 8. So if I have such and such to do, I'm gonna do that on Monday instead. People used to plan their lives around what was on TV. And the thing with the reruns in this, once they started doing it with I Love Lucy, people, I missed that before when it was on. I got to catch up with the episode I missed. So that's another kind of neat thing we have to thank them for, like you're saying now. Let's get into the characters. I Love Lucy centers around Lucy Ricardo. Lucy is a naive yet ambitious housewife who has a real zest for both life and her desire to do anything she can to make it in show business. Most of the show's episodes of I Love Lucy center around Lucy's uncanny ability to get both herself and her husband Ricky into trouble anywhere she even attempts to make it into show business. So again, that's what a lot of these shows were kind of based around,
Well, yes, and I remember watching it as a kid, and it was such a tongue-in-cheek premise because you know what I mean, because they are big stars, but they're playing characters that are trying to break in. You know what I mean? And you know, trying to get their foot in the door. You know, and I remember, mentally digesting all of that stuff when I was a kid. You know, watching it, you know, with my mom and my sister, you know, way back in the 60s.
And you know, I Love Lucy here in 2023, it's hard to believe that it's celebrating its 72nd anniversary. I mean, so that means the show premiered in 1951, 72 years ago. And a lot of times, you know, when you're watching these shows, you're not thinking about some of the stuff, but like being that I Love Lucy was a post-war era television show, I Love Lucy made sure that the character of Lucy Ricardo had all the traits that women from that time were expected to have. Lucy Ricardo was a devoted housewife to her husband Ricky. She was very secretive about her age. She was an attentive mother, stayed at home while her husband Ricky went to work. So again, we're not thinking about this stuff when the show is first premiering or we're seeing it for the first time. But like even you watch something like Leave It to Beaver back in the day, it was expected that the mom would stay home. You would never see an episode where the mother would even think about going to get a job. That just was unheard of back in the day.
Life was totally different. You know, it was frowned upon back in those days if the woman worked in the family, if she wasn't staying home as the homemaker. You know, so there's just the whole, the whole societal, thing about that at that time was very, very, very different. Lucy, was definitely the star and everything, but a lot of people don't really give Ricky credit. He was kind of the brains because he was, I haven't, when I was doing the research, I hadn't, verified, but I had, heard, because Desi Arnaz was in charge of, back in those days, he was in charge of Desi Lou. He was the guy that came up with the brainchild of doing the multi-cameras. Yeah, okay. It was his idea. Couldn't find anything to verify that, but there was somebody else that was talking about the history of Desi Lou, and this was years ago. But I remembered it because I didn't know that he was the guy that pioneered multi-cameras, being used, and just that, and the fact that them not wanting to move to the East Coast. Made the I Love Lucy show one of the first TV shows ever filmed here in Los Angeles. Yeah. So it's just the first on the 35 millimeter, the first on the reruns, the first on her being a studio head. I mean, it just goes on and on of all these things that that they created. They started those things, and like I was saying before, we all take those things for granted now. It's just the norm.
Oh yeah, and I was also reading in regards to Lucy was saying if you watch many of the episodes, you'd occasionally see her do things like cook, and because women at that time were not expected to go out and get a job, every time Lucy would attempt to go out and get a job or kind of make it in show business, she'd get in trouble. She'd always fail. That was a premise of the show. They could never have her go out and succeed in getting a job or really finally landing her big break to make it into show business, because then you just wouldn't have had a show then,
Yeah, you lose the premise. The show's got to have a premise,
And then there's also...
she part of the whole thing, about her becoming a comedian in the first place was this is way before she did I Love Lucy, but she discovered that the other beautiful female actresses in Hollywood, would not do physical comedy. They would do comedy, but they would not do physical comedy. And she discovered that she was another very beautiful woman, but she was willing to do physical comedy.
Yeah.
And so because the others wouldn't, boom, she was getting like work here, work there. It just opened up a door for her to be able to get work because she was willing to do something that the others wouldn't do. And then she just kept getting more and more work, and the next thing you know, she's got this reputation, and then now she moves into away from movies and doing the radio program.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
But that was really how she got into comedy, was to get work.
Yeah, and again,
really, just to be able to get work on a regular basis.
Yeah, and again, if it had never been for the I Love Lucy TV show, she never may have had that opportunity to do physical comedy she would become so legendary for. And that's one of the things people remember for her all these years later. And what's interesting, I was kind of amazed myself. I did not realize, again, because it's a little before my time, while I'm well aware of I Love Lucy, I was not aware of what a huge movie career she had prior to being on radio and television. And it's kind of in a way sad, because I think a lot of people, maybe just because a lot of people from that time are gone, have passed on, but a lot of people, when they think back on Lucile Ball, they think of I Love Lucy, obviously, and maybe even the radio show, but a lot of people aren't even aware of all the movies she made. She used to be
back in the 40s.
Yeah, she used to be huge, like with MGM Studios, from what I understand. And in fact, I think she had originally done a version of I forget Mine, Yours, and Ours, or something like that. Yeah.
Yours, Mine, and Ours.
Yeah.
That was after Lucy, and that was with Henry Fonda.
Wow.
And I remember as a kid going to the movies and seeing that movie, and that was a good movie.
Yeah, they done a remake a number of years ago, but and at the time when I seen the remake, like, I had no idea that there was a Lucile Ball version. But I was just even doing searching for stuff on Amazon, and I came across all these old Lucile Ball movies. I'm like, wow, I had no idea she made all these movies.
Well, she did have a very successful movie career, but she never really achieved
the same success that she had on TV.
Female lead status.
Yeah.
She never really attained, was able to achieve that until after I Love Lucy. Because she became such a huge star, and then when she started, did the long trailer with Desi, now she's hugely successful on both TV and in the movies.
Yeah, and
they were just it's really kind of, the best way to describe them is they were a genuine power couple.
Yeah, in fact, I was reading like some like quotes from Desi Arnaz and some stuff on the internet, and even after he'd been long divorced from Lucile Ball, and they'd both been remarried, he was quoted as saying that she like remained like the one true love of his life. I guess because they've been through so much.
They still remained very good friends. Yeah. After the divorce, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
But they have a lot to be proud of. They have a lot that they created. They are true I icons, and she lives as the icon, but Desi is kind of like back in the shadows now.
Yeah.
It really don't give him
the credit.
The credit, but he was
huge part of that.
He was the brains. There was a lot. Another thing that I found out about him that I did not know, he had a photographic memory.
Oh wow.
When he would read the script, he would read the script one time, and it was memorized.
Yeah, well, it kind of reminds you of, I think the only, probably the most famous husband and wife team probably before Lucy and Desi was George Burns and his wife Gracie. And then, of course, years later, you would have Sonny and Cher, where I think you can make a even comparison with Lucy and Desi versus Sonny and Cher, because like you're kind of saying, while Lucy was the star of a show, Desi was kind of the brains, very much like Sonny was the brains behind the success of Sonny and Cher.
Yes. They were it's just hard to
put into words.
We just kind of know them when we go into a shop that has Lucy and Desi plates and it's all these dead icons,
celebrities.
I don't know what you would call that type of store, but I've gone to many different places where there's a lot of shopping and stuff like that, kind of like Disney Walk.
I'd say maybe
Garden Walk at Disney, and I think there is one where it's like a store, and there's just all of these collectible kind of stuff, and it's like if you're a Lucy fan, or if you're a this, or if you're, you know what I mean, Elvis will be in there, and all of these, those, but now that's how we know these people now. Or if you're flipping the channels and you come across the black and whites on TV Land or something that. That's where we know them. But these people were like, they were
untouchable.
The beginning of the show, when their first episodes were airing, was when the Nielsen ratings were just born too.
Yeah.
And so the Lucy show was at the top of the Nielsen ratings. God, how many years?
I think
they dominated. They literally dominated.
I think I read 4 out of the 6 seasons that the show was on, they were like in the top spot. So that's pretty amazing for any show. And just to kind of hone in on what we've been saying on how different the world was 72 years ago in 1951 when I Love Lucy first premiered. It was saying that the 1950s America, most people would say that a woman's expected role was to stay home and cook and clean and raise the children. And any time a woman would try to do differently, they would be looked down on. Whereas even 72 years later now, 2023, we're talking and doing this today. You have any woman going out trying to get a job, trying to better herself. You hear all kinds of stuff like, "You go, girl power." There's all this encouragement. But back in the day, a woman would even think about not being at home when her husband comes home and I'm going to go and get a job. They would be looked down on.
Well, the studios had a problem. I think it's another first, where her being pregnant on TV.
Oh, in fact,
they couldn't even say the word pregnant back then.
Oh, yeah, in fact,
they had to say expecting.
In fact, so much to your point, I was reading when they first found out she was pregnant with her first. Apparently, she had suffered many miscarriages before that. So you can imagine how happy they were when little Desi Jr. was first born. I think that was first successful pregnancy. But at the time I was reading, they did not even want to show her pregnant stomach. They wouldn't shoot it. And they decided so much because of her getting pregnant. Okay, now we have to make Lucy and we have to make it so Lucy and Ricky are going to become parents. And that was like the first time that was ever done on TV. But also to the point, they decided they were not going to decide the sex of a baby until Lucy delivered her real baby. And since she had a boy, they decided, okay, since she really had a boy in real life, Ricky and Lucy on the show are going to have a little boy. And
little Ricky.
Yeah, that's how that was decided. I mean,
did you know that the episode where little Ricky was born had 44 million people viewed that episode? And back in the 1950s, 44 million was like gigantic because the population has like grown like Earth's population is so much bigger now than it was back in the 1950s. So when you have a smaller population, but you have 44 million people viewing that show, what does that say? That show, the public really embraced that show. They really embraced Ricky and Lucy.
And it's amazing all these years later how people from all different again, we're talking about a show that is turning 72 years old this year. And so people from, your generation, my generation, generations before us, are all fans of this show. And I think that also speaks volumes about what a great show is. And yet at the same time, because I Love Lucy is one of the first things to really be, first TV shows. Because again, 1951 was television in its infancy. And because of that, they're learning how to write scripts. They're learning how to, at that point they made big screen movies. But okay, how do we write a 30-minute TV show? What goes into that? And if you look at
it's totally different.
And if you look at
it's totally different than a script for a movie.
And if you look at these old episodes of I Love Lucy, what are some things that you immediately do? You notice the fact that they don't have too many episodes where they tell the backstory of how Ricky and Lucy met? You don't see too many episodes with like extended family members coming to visit. It's just pretty much Lucy
just her mom. That's it.
They had no character.
Scatterbrain mom. That's it.
Yeah, they had no character development back then. I was reading. They just kind of stuck to the people that were, Fred and Ethel, Ricky. You didn't really see too many other people. Occasionally,
occasionally they would throw in a guest star.
Yeah.
So Lucy could be starstruck and get in trouble doing some starstruck thing, that's inappropriate for Ricky's friend that's a big star.
And then I was reading another funny thing is, again, if you watch a lot of the episodes, there was kind of this humor about Ricky's accent, because he really talked like that. And I was reading that a decision was made early on that when they would write these scripts, the only one that was allowed in the episode to ever make fun of Ricky's accent was Lucy.
Yep, I read that too.
And you could, just doing something like that. Even going back, talking a little bit about Three's Company too. And the thing about making, Jack Tripper lying about being gay and that. Shows would never be able to get away with that, these days. They'd be accused of being racist or whatever. And so there was no thought of anything like that back in the day because, again, television was in its infancy and they were just kind of learning how to do it,
Well, just like racists that you're saying exists now, it existed back then.
Yeah, it just wasn't as...
just the fact that the studios had a problem with her being with a Latin guy.
Yeah.
That's racist.
Yeah.
So it existed then as much as it exists now.
Yeah,
but
it was hidden.
The whole thing was it's just what they proved, what Lucy and Ricky proved, is to the general public, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because if it mattered, the show would not have been as successful as it was. And if all these concerns that everybody had, about these racist concerns, if their concerns were right, the show would not have turned out to be so iconic. That's one of those things that both Ricky and Lucy had to fight back in those days to make their point. Just like actually getting the show off the ground and proving that a Latin and a white girl could do a show together, they had to do a skit to prove it to the studio execs and put it on for them to convince them that their concerns were unwarranted.
Yeah, and most of Lucy's attempts to break into show business, more often than not, would of course end in disaster, and that's kind of the whole premise of the show. As we were saying, if you didn't have it end in disaster, there's no comedy really there, you know. So that was the whole premise of the show.
And, there's another thing that we haven't really talked about. There was. There was a really good chemistry between all of the characters on the show.
Yeah.
But I was kind of surprised to find out that William Frawley and Vivian Vance,
couldn't stand each other.
They really didn't like each other. The entire time that they did the show, they really did not like each other.
So much to the point, I was reading, they were even offered to do a spin-off series of their own, and Vivian Vance hated William Frawley so much that she just flat out refused to do it.
Yeah, and I guarantee you the money was probably really good, too.
Yeah.
So, it was just that would really kind of surprise me, because they were so professional that when you watched the show, you had no indication whatsoever.
Yeah.
Their acting chemistry was working fantastically.
Oh, sure.
It's just when they weren't acting,
and I think
they were just being themselves, they were not compatible.
I think that's a true sign of a great actor, the fact that those two people off screen could hate each other so much, but while they're playing their parts on I Love Lucy, you're convinced that they're the best of friends, or that they get along and everything. And Gar, another thing that I really want to kind of now get into that you were touching on earlier in this episode was some of the sponsors, specifically Philip Morris. And this is another reason I love doing these shows, because I come across these fun facts, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Philip Morris also demanded that the series storyline was based in New York, like you said, and not in Hollywood. I Love Lucy featured laughter from a live studio audience, like you said, rather than the use of a more common laugh track, which made for a more authentic audience reaction. And if you, I don't know if you noticed the opening of I Love Lucy, the famous kind of heart scene.
The heart over the satin?
Yeah, they changed that because the thing with Philip Morris I was reading was that originally they had a different kind of opening, and it was kind of like a cartoon version of Lucy and Desi, and they were like kind of hanging on the like a pack of Philip Morris cigarettes, and they kind of really didn't want to do that, but because that was their sponsor, they kind of had to go along with it as long as Philip Morris was their sponsor. And the interesting thing that I learned was that William Hanna, who we of course know from Hanna-Barbera, he was the one that came up with that. Let me see here. It says, William Hanna actually came up with the kind of cartoon version of that, and before he had anything to do with Hanna-Barbera, but Flintstones, he actually worked for Paramount Pictures, so that's kind of interesting to learn about.
Yeah. Another thing that I found out about the show is there's so many comedians nowadays.
Yeah.
That their whole career is their expertise at improvising. Mm-hmm. Will Ferrell is an improviser, and there's a lot of other people that are really, really funny, and it's that's what they're really strong at doing is improvising. But on the Lucy show, there was no improvising allowed whatsoever.
Oh wow, that's amazing! Yeah.
It was, and there were times that it made it very difficult because when they had Harpo Marx on I Love Lucy, and they do that mirror scene.
Yeah.
That's Harpo Marx is an improviser.
Oh, sure.
And he never does a scene the same twice. And it was really super hard for Lucy to be able to, to work with him because that was not her forte, improvising and doing that. She was, everything had to be rehearsed. Both her and Ricky, everything had to be rehearsed. That was a huge difficulty for her doing that scene with Harpo Marx.
Oh wow!
But nowadays we look at that scene, it's iconic. It really is. It's one of those episodes, one of those scenes that sticks out of all the episodes. And I'm not saying it's the only one, because there are other ones that stick out too.
In fact,
that one is an iconic scene. But yeah, she really had a hard time with that.
In fact, one that comes to mind too is the episode of where Lucy meets Superman, George Reeves.
Yeah, I remember that. Back in the day, when I was a kid, oh my gosh, Superman's on Lucy.
And now, Gar, I must make a quick correction here. So let me read what I got here. The original animated opening of the show was created by the animation team of William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, who refused to take credit because at the time they were exclusive contract to MGM at the time. So again, an iconic show like this that is just kind of becoming popular at the time. These two guys created the animated opening, but they could not take the credit because they were exclusively, anything they did was supposed to be involved with.
Yeah, the other people they were working for got wind, man. They probably get fired. You know?
And it should be noted that the show's original opening featured animated versions of Lucy and Ricky climbing down a pack of Philip Morris cigarettes. And in early episodes, Ricky and Lucy and even Fred and Ethel Mertz were shown smoking Philip Morris cigarettes, who were the show's sponsors at the time. This is why once the show went into syndication, they created the now classic Heart on Saturn opening. Because because the original opening was no longer considered appropriate. So again, just think about in that little bit of time, because they're sponsored by Philip Morris, they showed smoking, I guess, in some of the episodes, and then eventually the network and other people in Hollywood start thinking, it's not probably appropriate that we're kind of encouraging people to smoke, and because of that and their change in attitude of stuff like that, they have to make a new opening for the show. And again, I was so really kind of stunned and interested to learn that William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, they created the original animated opening of the show, and I'm like, these are guys we know for doing the Flintstones and the Jetsons and stuff, and they would go on to have their own huge success doing their own thing. But that just goes to show you that a lot of people that work in Hollywood, they get their start doing other things, and again, you look at that and okay, well, there's animation that was involved in that opening, so it shouldn't be too surprising. But I never knew that they were even involved at all in I Love Lucy.
Yep. Because Philip Morris was sponsoring the show, they also required the actors when the show first was airing back in the early 50s. They required the actors and actresses to smoke a lot.
Wow, that's how different everything has changed,
It's so weird to see, to look back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To look back, because, now it's impossible to look back and not compare it to what
the world is today.
You know what I mean? To see how different, things are and everything. But, I just hope that that there will be future generations that will still enjoy Lucy and Desi, and that it continues on to be able to make future younger generations discover the wonders of the beauty of retro.
Oh, sure.
Because that's what we would call that now. It's, Lucy and Desi is retro.
Yeah.
But I really do, hope, that, there are still younger generations that embrace retro.
I mean, even if you look at Desi Arnaz, as an actor and what he did in Hollywood and with Desi Lou and all that, he was probably the first, I dare say, popular, like, Cuban or Hispanic star to kind of really make it big. And then probably since him, another one comes to mind, maybe, Eric Estrada from Chips, even comedian George Lopez. So he really helped pave the way for a lot of those people. And before we kind of wrap up today's episode, I'd like to talk a little about the character of Ricky Ricardo, because, of course, Ricky Ricardo is Lucy's husband. Ricky Ricardo is an up-and-coming Cuban-American singer and band leader who has a personality that can be described as being quite excitable, whose patience is often tested by his wife's crazy antics and desire to do anything to make it in show business. Ricky's wife often frustrates him at times because she often spends huge amounts of money on expensive clothes and furniture. Like with Lucy, very little is discussed about Ricky's past or his family, except for the fact that he is Cuban and has a mother and a brother, and that's all that they ever mentioned, kind of about his family background.
You mentioned George Lopez. Did you know that originally, when they were writing the characters and coming up with the scripts and everything, before the show was even in production, they were thinking about calling Ricky's character Larry Lopez.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yes, that's true. They were seriously considering him being, so it would be the Lucy and Larry show.
Wow.
Lucy and Desi is so much better.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? But yeah, they were going to do that, and it's so funny because when you mentioned George Lopez, that's when you reminded me of that.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is in regards to Ricky Ricardo and I Love Lucy. I guess he was actually an actual musician, and he was actually conducting the orchestra, and that was actually the Desi Arnaz orchestra, but he was allowed to bring with him onto the show, and I guess that took some work for him to convince him to let him use his own orchestra. But I mean, that was a big part of the show too, just those scenes with the band.
Absolutely. Another one of those iconic scenes that stands out, is the Italian movie.
Oh,
the one where she's with that lady and they're stomping on the grapes with their feet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That scene is so funny. That one, and then there was the other one where she has to, she's taken like some cough syrup.
Yeah.
And back in the 1950s, cough syrup had alcohol in it.
Oh, wow.
And it also had like codeine in it.
Okay, wow.
This cough syrup back in the 1950s was really, really dangerous.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't what we consider cough syrup nowadays.
I mean,
it was like way different.
I mean, yeah.
And she's doing a commercial, and the name of it is like a tongue-twisting name for the product.
Wow.
And she's filming a commercial, and each time she's taking a little bit of the cough syrup. So each time she does another take, she's getting drunker and drunker and drunker, and that scene is hilarious. And I found out that she, because she's not an improviser, and that scene, kind of requires you to, to do that, and she literally had to rehearse everything, even getting drunker. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it really transferred well in the scene, because I mean she it all seems seamless and it all seems real.
Oh, sure.
Everything. But she in interviews after that, she was saying that, she had a huge amount of difficulty doing that particular scene.
Wow. Gar,
even though today it's an iconic scene.
Oh, sure. Gar, I've had fun doing this today, and like I hope people are as excited to hear this. It's going to premiere next weekend, but we got 2 more parts to do, and as we like to do before we wrap up each episode, we like to kind of take a look at what was the world like back in 1951 when I Love Lucy premiered. Well, I noted a few things down that I found very interesting. Things that were going on in the world in 1951. The first baseball game that was ever colorized premiered on TV in 1951. I mean, just think about that. I mean, again, people used to love, they still do love watching baseball on TV, but can you imagine when all of a sudden you're able to watch it in color? I mean, that had to be an amazing time in history.
Yeah, but back in 1951, very few people could afford a color TV.
Yeah. And then
it was outrageously expensive back in those days.
And again, we're talking 1951, the infancy of television, which is kind of interesting because Charles Ginsberg, I'm not sure who he was, but he's a guy that created the first ever videotape recorder in 1951. And when you say videotape recorders, it's not the common kind of VCR that we think of today. This was, I think, specifically for TV studios, so that they had the ability to record these shows live and kind of create an archive and keep build like a studio of these shows that they were able to now have kind of keep it on tape or something. So that was the first time that was ever done. It said that Nat King Cole's Unforgettable was it hit number 2 on the chart. So that's kind of what was popular music back in 1951. The Korean War was going on at the time. Harry Truman was the 33rd president of the United States. That just kind of give you a little reference point there. In 1951, the most famous person at the time was the old Duke, John Wayne. 1951, to most people, the most funniest person at the time was Uncle Milton Berle. That's taking you back a ways, huh?
Milton Berle, yes.
And this, I thought we'd end it on a real funny one today. 1951, I think you'll know what I'm talking about, Gar, introduced the world to what is now commonly known as Tupperware parties. That's how far back that goes.
Oh my God, that's the beginning of Tupperware, huh?
Yeah. Wow. And I love Tupperware for the simple fact, anytime you go anywhere, you take it with you and you can get your leftovers.
Another thing that we take for granted nowadays.
Yeah, well, Gar Borras, I really enjoyed doing this episode, and just to let people know what's coming up in part 2 of our We Love Lucy episode, we're going to talk about, for a good portion of the episode, about the radio show we were talking about, my famous husband, I believe it was called. That was her radio show that kind of launched I Love Lucy. So I wanted you and me, I sent you like a link to check out one of those old radio shows, and we're going to kind of take time to listen to that, and kind of you and me will have a conversation next time about what we think of a radio show, maybe compared to I Love Lucy and what it became. And then we're also going to get into what the Desi Lucy Comedy Hour was, and that came after I Love Lucy. So, and we're doing this in a 3-part episode because we really want to tell the complete Lucile Ball story. And in order to do that, I think we'd have to take like 3 episodes to do it, and so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, you can't do it in one episode. Yeah. There's just too much.
Yeah. And again, I mean, like a lot of people, Lucile Ball has an interesting career. I mean, like I said, she had maybe not as huge of a movie career, but she did a lot of movies that people, I think, have either forgotten about or aren't even aware, because most people, when they think of Lucile Ball, let's be honest, they think I Love Lucy.
Absolutely, yes. But, these other programs are definitely going to be something to check out.
Sure.
Because the purpose of this is to bring up things, either give a little more depth to storylines, so people kind of get more dimension instead of just the storylines, or a little bit more depth about the time period.
Yeah.
A whole, just to give more detail.
Yeah.
To the story, and that's the real purpose of this.
Yeah.
Those other, splitting it up into 3 episodes is a must.
Oh, sure.
Because to give respect to all of the work that we're going to be talking about.
And just to explain a little further to people. Each episode, every show we don't do is not a 3-part episode. We've done that in the past, but there's maybe 2 or 3 other times we've done it. And again, I think the main purpose is because, something with, when we discuss the Tonight Show, there's no way in hell you can talk about the Tonight Show in just one episode. It's got a huge history, And even Gar, that initially was supposed to be a 2-part episode, but during the discussion, Gar said, you know what? We spent, 2 episodes just talking about the host. The whole point of a Tonight Show is like the guests and people you have come on, and so that was real important. That's what I enjoy about this show too. Sometimes while we're doing the episodes, ideas come up that we never even thought of, and that's the cool thing about the show we do. A lot of it is really unscripted. So I could not do it without you, Gar. Thanks for doing this. I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. Okay?
Yes.
Take care, my friend. Bye.
Chaotic Riffs Magazine.